It's 2024 and the SEO Weekly is back. Last year was ridiculous. We're talking SGE, still not rolled out yet. DOJ lawsuit, user interactions matter. Where are people actually searching? Reddit, TikTok, does Google still matter? SEO is not dead. SEO is not dead, but we've got so many great things to talk about. The Verge article, not as bad as Semrush ranking factor study, correlation study, but still interesting, and so much more. I can't wait to share all this stuff with you. Let's dive back in. Come on, come join me. Come join me. You know you missed it. It's 2024 and I am back. Welcome back to the SEO Weekly, where queries are weird, advice is controversial, and everything depends. I'm your host, Garrett Sussman of iPullRank, and every week I cover everything going on in the world of SEO. We're talking Google updates, blog posts, podcasts, webinars, SEO, Twitter, X tools, you name it. I'm on it. If you're into this, please subscribe to our iPullRank YouTube channel. Give us a like to the video, surface it in the algorithms. It generally helps that visibility, and I appreciate it. As an SEO, who would I be if I didn't ask for things that help? Last year, 2023, so many things happened. I'm not going to go through a whole recap, but the three key things that have been coming on to our mind and our focus is SGE, not rolled out yet. The experiment ended. We still haven't seen it. When will it come? It's going to impact traffic. It's something all SEOs need to consider because it's going to influence the way that people search, and it's going to influence the amount of search traffic that goes to publishers. Number two, the DOJ lawsuit, still fallout. We knew probably that user interactions, what you click on and go to a website and dwell time and things like that might actually impact the rankings. The DOJ lawsuit showed that that was the case, and it's something that we have to take into consideration when it comes to what will surface us up to the top of the rankings. Why do you think sometimes these big brands rank despite not being a focus or having topic authority for something? People know who they are. They click on the link. It definitely helps, as proved by this evidence. And finally, are people using other platforms beyond Google to search? Using TikTok, using Reddit, using ChatGPT and LLMs, other communities popping up? Is the web changing? Will people continue to depend on Google? Something to consider as you're building out more of a holistic strategy, whether it's creating videos, creating content, and where you are beyond SEO. There's a lot of good stuff to cover from this past week, so let's dive into our main story. So the feature story this week is around another article from The Verge on SEO. Remember, we had our whole content goblins, how SEOs ruin the internet. This article by Mia Sato, The Perfect Webpage, is actually a more nuanced and appropriate take, and it highlights how Google has trained an entire industry to create web pages that serve the search engine and not necessarily users, despite the fact that Google says, what do people want to read? Now, what's interesting and something that we've learned in 2023 due to the DOJ lawsuit against Google was that Google is actually using things like user behavior to influence the rankings. Zilbershtein actually had a really great tweet where he highlights a slide from the DOJ published materials, the evidence that Google takes into consideration, one, what you say you are, your content, two, what others say you are, links to your content, and three, what users think when they interact with your site, those user behaviors. So your content needs to address what someone's searching for. The links prove that you are a viable, authoritative source. They're a link of confidence. Who links to you matters, and then how users go to your page and find what they're looking for and stay on your website as opposed to just bouncing right back to Google matters as well. Now, what Mia does in her article is she breaks down how naturally, if one of your goals is to get traffic from people's searches on Google, organic search, you're going to want to create the best content for whatever your targeted keyword is. She highlights, though, that Google trains us to create certain types of content that is most likely to rank high, because if you are the source, you're going to rank higher, you're going to get more traffic, and that leads to homogenized content. We see what type of content is ultimately surfaced, and so we all end up doing copycat content based on, you know, not only just the actual text, the relevance of the text, but the structure of the web page, the design, you know, what is included and how we phrase it. Are we answering the queries as explicitly and concisely as possible, whether or not we're providing more information? And ultimately that results in similar types of content for the top 10 organic rankings, taking into consideration all of the different SERP features. And she calls out how that's problematic, because we're creating content for Google that's boring, that's not nuanced, that doesn't have a brand voice, that's only answering questions in a super robotic way that isn't necessarily what users want. She also addresses some issues that were responded to by Danny Sullivan when it comes to authority, creating these author, kind of boxes or author pages, for Google. Now, Danny actually responds to that and says author bylines aren't something you do for Google, and they don't help you rank better. So just putting who you are and spinning up a bio, whether it's true or even worse, like false, doesn't necessarily influence Google, that explicit type of content. Now you can make the argument that, whether you have those credentials on other sites, you write elsewhere, you're written up in Wikipedia, your authority credentials based on you as an entity, how you represent across the web, will influence the value that you bring to a piece of content, but it's not definitive, which leads to another massive piece of content produced by Semrush. They put out their 2024 ranking factors survey, and unfortunately it's a bit ill-named. Basically, it is a massive correlation study, right? It looks at search results and it does what Mia's calling out. It addresses what are the correlation between things like word count and text relevance and domain ratings and all these different elements, these factors, and how they might relate to what ranks high. Now, the thing is, as humans, we always want to put a story to the statistics that we see. We want to say, oh, okay, well, if it has, this word in the domain, that the keyword, then it's more likely to rank highly. And that will influence our strategy and our tactics. Oh, if I know this as a factor, then I'm going to incorporate it into all my content. However, that's not how statistics always work, especially with these correlation studies. They don't mean causation. So it's really helpful to look at this correlation study and come up with some hypotheses to test. So, the correlation study is saying the relevance of the text, to the keyword will result in more rankings. And that makes sense, right? Like if I'm searching for how to fix my bicycle, I expect to see content that in the text teaches me how to fix my bicycle. So I'd want to create content that shows how to fix a bicycle based on the relevant text. Anyway, we can use these studies, read it at your own, at your own time, and come to your own conclusions. But just remember, just because a ranking factor or a ranking factor correlation study says this is a ranking factor, doesn't mean it's definitive. And things are always changing anyway. Something that might matter more for your specific query at one time of year, seasonality, or based on search intent, might change at any given moment. That's my big call out. It's just that these correlation studies are interesting and they help you create hypotheses to test, but they're not definitive. That does not mean causation. What do you think? Did you read the study? Did you read the article? Do you think we have a problem when it comes to the way that we create content for the web? Or is it Google's responsibility to surface great content without us having to adhere to whatever goes into the algorithm to rank? In the world of Google, I'm happy to report there's no current Google algorithm update as of this recording currently being rolled out. We can all take a breath and still, kind of sift through the dust settling of all of the major updates in 2023. Now you can start to really analyze what's been going on. That said, this past week, Google Search Central provided a lot of insights in terms of what they've accomplished over the past year. Documentation updates, improvements to Google Search Console, all sort of structured data improvements. Really great stuff from the team. They genuinely care. They're trying to make the web a better place, even if us as SEOs take any hint or things they say, use it as gospel, and have that impact our actual strategy and tactics. Go check out their documentation for any updates that they're making. They update it constantly to the documentation. For instance, they recently improved their anchor text. They're switching ID references to hashtags because that's a best practice for structured data and schema. They've even clarified the primary source of snippets, which is specifically from the content text, not necessarily for structured data. A lot of insights just from the documentation that they're doing. Now, there was one highlighted update that came out regarding Google web pages. Basically, this was something that they've been pushing for the past few years for like local businesses. If you don't want to have a website, you can actually use a Google website. Well, they're actually shutting down these Google business profile websites, which kind of sucks. It's a typical move by Google to produce some great feature or product and then ultimately kill it, get rid of it. There's like a whole graveyard of Google products. But for the website, if you weren't investing in it, you might use this free product from Google. And so as of March 1st, it's not going to exist anymore. They'll redirect all the way to like June of 2024 to your Google business profile results listing on Google search, but the actual web page is gone. So if you are working with small business clients that have that, or if you yourself are dependent on that, then you need to come up with another solution. Maybe that's like Wix or some other very easy to access website. That's Google. A lot of things to keep in mind, and I got to give them credit. The actual blog post that they produced was the URL was not an AI generated post. So that team, they have a sense of humor over there. One of the more technical and advanced skills that you can use for SEO is data analysis, specifically with machine learning. And with AI, those capabilities to automate so many SEO tasks at scale has become so much more accessible, valuable, interesting, you name it. Well, Lazarina Stoy has been working on machine learning way before all this AI stuff went mainstream, coming up with various scripts to be able to do really interesting tasks around keyword research, entity extraction, you name it. Well, she put together a really cool article on Search Engine Land identifying some of the different ways and tasks that you can use AI and machine learning for SEO. But most importantly, she identifies that different models had different strengths and weaknesses. So she compares ChatGPT or GPT-4 with Google's Cloud API. She goes through 9 major SEO tasks, everything from entity recognition and syntax analysis to transcriptions or text-to-text transformations, even capturing images using the vision, the image AI. And she breaks down which is better at which. So if you are familiar with using those tools and building out these automated processes, she shows you how to do it. I think it's a highly useful article, and she has a complimentary 30-minute video where she shows the value as well. Definitely check that out. And everything Lazarina Stoy, she's been cranking out all sorts of articles. In fact, there's another one that I'm going to reference later in this episode. Speaking of generative AI, there was a really interesting study that came out from Authoritas. Lauren O'Toole and his team basically did a study of 1,000 different keywords looking at the impact of the search generative experience on search results. How often does it trigger? What sort of links appear in the AI superpowered snapshot? Interesting site, big caveat, as I mentioned with the Semrush factor study, this is correlation, right? 1,000 keywords isn't a ton to come to any sort of causal conclusions, but we can start to analyze, hypothesize, all that stuff from this information. I would say the most interesting thing that Laurence surfaced was from his study, like 93% of the results of the links in the AI snapshot actually weren't top ranking links organically. They weren't even in the top 10. Now, this actually directly goes against what our founder Mike King did with his study that showed, you see 1, 2, top 9 results showing up. So you can imagine that if you're thinking that anything outside of the top 10 could get into the SGE, then you definitely want to try to optimize to get in there. It's a major opportunity if you're struggling to rank in the top 3 because you don't have the brand recognition or you don't have the resources really to get all the backlinks and, outside of the high quality text relevant content. Interesting study by that team. Adjacent to that and relevant to the OpenAI versus the New York Times article, I actually wrote an article on the impact of SGE on the news industry right before the holiday, but after I did my last episode of the SEO Weekly. So definitely check that out. I talk all about the implications of SGE and how, depending on the topicality of news, right? They're covering current events. So is it less likely for SGE to show up for something that just happened where Google might not have all the information and there might be misinformation? You're not probably going to see that as much. The other thing is the big question of whether or not you should actually, block Google and, all these LLMs from, using your content within the actual training data. That's a whole other issue, but it's something to consider going forward. We'll see with these licensing agreements if they happen in the lawsuit. But finally, my prescriptive recommendation for news publishers is Mike actually built a tool called Raggle, which allows you to look at the mathematical vector embeddings of the content in SGE. Basically, what that means is how is Google determining what is relevant for the query from an AI generative standpoint? A lot of jargon, but he found that it's not just from the content in general in the top 10, it's actually coming up with this kind of new formula, coming up with a generative AI text based on the query, and then pulling from different little chunks across all these top results. And with Raggle, you can actually look at a query, you can see what chunks are being pulled into the generative AI snapshot, and then you can reverse engineer that with your content. So you use the chunks to get into the SGE. Now, we have seen a paper recently in terms of optimizing for generative AI LLM models, and recommendations are using statistics, using, quotes from experts, that sort of thing. Common sense things that you'd think would help you out anyway, but the study actually shows in practice that it's worth doing. So great insights across the board. Definitely check out my article. I think you'll find it really interesting. And I got a bunch of insights from SEO news experts like John Shihada, Shelby Blackley, Jesse Wilms, Ali Berry, all participated and gave their 2 cents. So check that out. So since my last episode of the SEO Weekly, we hosted a really awesome webinar on iPullRank with Andrea Volpini of WordLift, talking all about how you can help Google and LLMs understand your business. Andrea did a fantastic job breaking down the crossover between knowledge graphs, like structured data information all about your business, your website, your content, and the actual LLM. Because the LLM is trained on a large data set, but not necessarily your content. And so to specialize it, to make it more effective, to make Google and the SGE, for instance, understand you better, if you can provide that knowledge graph and build that out yourself, then you're more likely for Google to understand and for you to surface in these generative AI different platforms. So Andrea breaks it down. It gets technical, it gets philosophical. It's very, very interesting of how you should be building out that knowledge graph using structured data to ultimately show up in these LLMs and use that for your own generative AI content creation as well. Really awesome webinar. You can check it out. The link is in the description, obviously. In the world of SEO Twitter, Brody Clark pointed out he was covering the fact that FAQ snippets were kind of being deprecated as a rich snippet feature in the SERPs. You wouldn't see FAQs appear within the organic SERPs, which was something that SEOs love to mark up and then get more real estate. So those went bye-bye. Then all of a sudden they came back and people were like, oh, that's false alarm. Google's not actually doing that. And then now they're actually gone. So Brody was keeping us updated on that whole situation. FAQ, the rich results, the visuals, the FAQs in your SERPs, now gone. Still probably do the structured data because there's value in structured data and providing Google more information. It's just not going to have that visual benefit. On the other side of SEO Twitter or X or whatever, I'm calling it Twitter, whatever, still doing that. Two kind of hilarious trolly parody accounts for the SEO industry. First came a few months ago. Who knows who's doing it? It's anonymous, but Search Honesty is kind of trolling the Search Central Twitter account, giving advice around things that they keep messing up, that the search results are bad, or jokes about Reddit and SEOs going to Reddit for all sorts of, SEO comment affiliate link spam, or even just calling out Forbes for, just ranking for all sorts of ridiculous crap that Forbes has no business ranking for. And then you also have the Search Onion, which is another one. And they had so many fun like call outs like SEO voice search, still definitely not a thing. GA4 is gonna, start replacing itself with a random number generator because people hate GA4. Anyway, two fun parody accounts that I find entertaining personally, and I think you should check out as well. Moving on to the sphere of general SEO, really great article by Glenn Gabe talking all about how you need to focus on improving highly visible but low quality or unhelpful content because it can have a massive negative impact on your SEO and your visibility. Basically, Glenn breaks down from the DOJ lawsuit that revealed that Google, really takes click-through rate and dwell time into consideration for rankings, that if you have highly visible content, ranks highly, could be really important pages on your site or just pages that for whatever reason do really well and people are clicking through to it, but then they're getting to a page that has really thin or unhelpful or crappy content and then they leave. Those user interaction signals are going to show Google that your site is not quality. And in the context of the helpful content system, when Google is classifying your site as to be helpful or not, if it's seeing a lot of those highly visible but low quality pages, that could have a massive impact on your general site level rankings and ultimately drop you significantly, hurting your search traffic. Glenn's been looking through a variety of sites and seeing that in play over the last few algorithm updates, especially revealing some examples from the DOJ lawsuit, speaking to Panda Nuyuk's speech about Nav Boost, or the interview where he talks about this, kind of secret but revealed factor of how Google uses navigational signals and some of that CTR to actually influence their rankings. That is, it's a really great article for you to get some insights into why you should consider it. He also, sees some past John Mueller interviews and how John's messaging has changed over the years. Great article by Glenn. Speaking of Nav Boost, Dan Taylor actually broke down what it is and explained it really well in a blog post recently. Identified the fact that Google's using this Nav Boost to enhance search results by using navigating queries, and then using user click data, focusing on relevancy and user intent. Basically, it looks at, up to 13 months of search accuracy. It was actually up to 18 months back in 2017, but it looks at that click data, and it's the more obvious example of what Google's doing to influence the rankings. Now, what is the big takeaway from this? It's that whenever an SEO is talking to you about site architecture, the way that your site and URLs are linked to each other and laid out and your navigation is set up, all has an impact on the way that Google interacts with your site. So it's very important to have a clean, well-organized site architecture and navigation so Google can more effectively understand. And when it's clean, obviously that would potentially not only benefit users, but benefit Google and ultimately potentially help your rankings. Anyway, great article by Dan. If you're wondering what the heck is Nav Boost, he breaks it down really effectively. Okay, so some interesting data for John Shahada of NewsDash all around Google perspectives. So this is different. This perspectives is actually different than the filtering that you'll see for most every query at this point, where you know how you see your images and your videos and you see perspectives kind of showing different, more opinions on whatever you're searching for. Well, there's a carousel perspectives that shows up below top stories that's more news related. Can be, you know, tied to news, can be tied to sports, can be tied to health. Anyway, John looked at what were the results that were coming out, and he found that it was actually dominated by YouTube, by Twitter, by Reddit, which is really interesting because those perspectives are, you know, purely social media. You know, it's not like the opinion pieces of news publications, but they have an impact. They have a lot of real estate on Google. And so that's why it's always so important to actually look at the SERPs and see what's popping up for your query. So if you want to show up and get that real estate, if there's videos, you want to create more videos. If there's images, you want to create more images. And so if there is perspectives that actually target a query, then, and I'm sorry, Reddit, that I'm recommending this, but like Twitter, Reddit, YouTube, you want to create content for that query on those platforms with the hope that it'd be surfaced. Anyway, interesting insight, worth taking into consideration. So that second piece of content that I referenced from Lazarina Stoy, well, it's not duplicate content, but that is the topic that she wrote about. She wrote an article on Wix all about duplicate content. Like, what is it? When is it problematic? When is it not? How do you fix it? Super helpful, because it's very confusing for SEOs when duplicate content isn't an issue, say like syndication, for instance, or fair use, versus when it is an issue where you're just paraphrasing and stealing from somebody else, or it's literally the same content across your entire website and it's just confusing for users. Same for like metadata, you know, titles, whatnot. Lazarina gives you the tools, whether it's going to Google Sheets and creating an app script or using plagiarism checker tools, you name it. She has specific tactics to address each really useful article. Like I said, she's been cranking out great stuff across the board recently. Aleda Solis continues to crank out incredible SEO community building content, whether it's her newsletter, SEO FOMO, or her Crawling Mondays video series, or her biggest, like learningseo.io, which is an amazing website of curated content from the industry teaching you how to do SEO. Well, we've gotten interactive. Aleda, over the last few weeks, created a new SEO FOMO hub, which is a forum for people to communicate and share their questions, provide answers. It's going to be moderated by her. There's already like 700 people in there and some really interesting threads across the board. So, you know, everything SEO, Aleda's crushing it. Go ahead, sign up. It's free. Highly recommend it. Awesome community. And there were a few really cool tools that were produced by our own SEO community. First off was Mike Ginley. Mike put together a really cool Looker Studio template that takes into consideration your Google Search Console data and applies filters for search intent and brand and questions. And he breaks down how to do it. He's also available to help. So that's a cool free template tool for you to use in Google's Looker Studio. Then Lydia Infante put together a really cool custom GPT that helps you build out person schema for your website. So if you want to make sure that Google understands who you are as a person, all the information that you need, it'll prompt you via Lydia's custom GPT, like who you are, your business, your bio, you name it, and then gives you the JSON schema, the structured data that you can then put on your website for better clarity about you as a person entity. And then finally, Paul Shapiro put together a really cool tool called SEO Diff, which allows you to leverage the Wayback Machine, which catalogs, a ton of content from the past, takes a snapshot in time of a specific web page. The thing with the Wayback Machine, it allows you to compare the visuals between two pages, two snapshots, but not the HTML. As an SEO, sometimes we need to get under the hood. So Paul's tool on Streamlit allows you to look at those differences between the actual HTML, the head, the body, meta changes, you name it, you can see it. And then if you do have an OpenAI API access key, you can apply ChatGPT to it. So you can do an analysis of your website using ChatGPT. He has a pre-built prompt that you can modify as well, but really useful tool. 3 cool tools across the board. I love AI. What can I say? I love AI. I'm an AI optimist. What can I say? Okay. But speaking of, check out the podcast. Yeah. And before the break, had a couple of really great conversations, interviews on the Rankable podcast. I had Chris Butterworth, and we talked all about the impact of our digital lives on the environment. You know, it was hopeful, but also depressing. It really kind of highlights the amount of things that we do, whether it's like replying to an email thread with the entire thread in the email that leaves a carbon footprint. Anyway, I think it's a valuable listen. Definitely check out Chris. And then really exciting interview with the head of content over at Ahrefs, Ryan Law. He's a legend in the industry, and we're talking all about generative AI. A lot of people have hot takes on how the output of the content is crap. Well, Ryan's an optimist. He shared how he uses that tool to influence his day-to-day, his content generation, how it's been really helpful. Actually, I'll let him share his 2 cents from the interview.
In terms of creativity and coming up with raw ideas, AI is going to be far more creative and unhindered than a human brain is. But the missing part of that is the credibility portion. Like, it doesn't matter how exciting an idea is, how amazing this bit of SEO thought leadership is, if it comes from somebody or some entity that has never done SEO. Even if the information is valid and helpful, I think no one's going to care about it because it's not anchored in first-person experience. So I think this is something I've been thinking a lot about, like there was a time when in SEO, the main focus was providing accuracy. Searchers wanted information to be accurate. That was what mattered. But now it's actually so easy to get the right answer to something. I think people are going to care more about getting the right answer from the right person as well. So the provenance of content is going to become even more important than what it used to be, a year ago, 10 years ago.
So there you go. And I'm with Ryan. I think there's a lot of creative opportunities if you're using it in a creative way. Check out the rest of those interviews along with all the other interviews we did over the last few months before the new year. We've got some more interviews coming over the next few weeks. I'm really excited. Keep your eyes peeled for that. But that's it. Another episode of the SEO Weekly in the books. We are back 2024. Is it going to be as ridiculous as 2023? I hope not, but it's more fun. It's always changing. Things are happening, and I have a big surprise announcement coming over the next few weeks that I'm really excited to share with you. Thank you for tuning in. As always, if you've made it this far, if you're into this stuff, subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, share it with someone that you adore and love in the SEO industry. My name is Garrett Sussman of iPullRank. I will catch you next week. Peace.